Cool. You guys good if I start? Sorry, my voice sounds like a frog. I've been talking a lot. So hey, my name is Eric Escobar. I'm a pen tester full-time and hacker of LaserTag in my off time. This is not going to be a super serious security talk like some of the stuff I've given before, because sometimes security stuff is just for fun and there's no big practical use, no 0 days, not anything crazy. And so I just want to throw that out there, that this isn't like, oh, you can compromise the endpoint systems of all these LaserTag systems. This is a weakness in how they're deployed, and hopefully at the end of the day, if you guys want to build your own, that's the takeaway here of how to do it and a little bit of why. So first and foremost, I did not build this to be a troll to young kids, my cousins who I play LaserTag with. I built this because there is a single LaserTag facility in my town, and there's a whole league associated with it, and there are people that come and play multiple times a week, and they absolutely wreck people that don't come, multiple times a week. And make matters worse, they've like Call of Duty-fied it. What I mean to say by that is, the more you come, the better weapons you get, the better armor you get, all the better things you get to level up. So really, when when you're doing LaserTag, when you're fighting against these guys, they're trying to own you, so that they can level up and gain experience. So a room full of little kids, that's absolutely what they want to take out, so they get all the experience, so they can level up, so they can be on the leaderboard. So it takes away from the fun of it, because you have somebody who's like 30 years old going in there and taking out a bunch of junior hires like at a youth group. So this is to combat those people. So first, I'm going to talk to the basics of how LaserTag works. It's basically a less than fancy TV remote. A TV remote remembers a lot of different codes. You have your up, down, power, all that stuff. A LaserTag gun, all it knows is just one single code, and that is, the trigger. When you pull the trigger, a single round going out. All infrared is just a little LED light that your eyes can't pick up. And really the signal here, it's just a single shot, from your gun. So every time you pull the trigger, it sends a pulse of light out. It's not very sophisticated at all, and that's inherently where the weakness lies. So you probably, when you look at the front of your remote, you notice that, hey, you don't see anything. There's just a little LED bulb there. Well, LaserTag taggers, when you go somewhere, you'll notice that when you pull the trigger, you actually see a flash on the wall. That flash on the wall is completely theatrics. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just to give somebody the impression that, hey, when you pull the trigger, like, that is the pulse going out there. So what you actually see when you pull the trigger isn't actually anything at all. That's visible light. Infrared, which is what actually is transmitting the signal, that is in the wavelength that you can't see. And if you've ever seen like a security camera or something, how they kind of glow red, that's infrared light. So what's nice is that if you have a older phone camera that doesn't have an infrared filter, or a security camera that has like a night vision mode on it, you can use that to at least see the signals, kind of debug stuff, and go from there. And so this is just a dumb example I pulled off of Google. That's what it looks like if you're looking through this from like a night vision camera, from anything that doesn't have an infrared filter on it. And it's a good way to troubleshoot, and it's also a good way to pick up any hidden cameras, just as a side note if you're anywhere. So kind of going forward about, this is what a similar LaserTag setup looks like. You see all the blinking lights on the front. In actuality, those blinking lights are only to indicate that there's a target. They are not in any way, shape, or form receiving anything. In between the little blinky lights is actually the infrared receiver. And if you look really hard at like the little clear bulb that's on the front of these like targets or jackets or whatever, all they are just normal infrared receivers like you find in your TVs, in your pretty much any electronic that uses a remote. They all have the same receiver, and they're you can buy about 100 of them off eBay for about $5. So everything's incredibly cheap because it's so ubiquitous and it's in every device. So of course an engineer for this kind of stuff is gonna take his time, and get something cheap, because why not? They're not going to reinvent a protocol, because who's actually going to hack this? I mean, that at the end of the day, it takes somebody pretty desperate to win at LaserTag to do this. See, I came into laser, like, full disclosure, I came into laser tag and I had absolutely no level ups, no power ups, and so they were mopping the floor with us. And if you notice from the tagger on the left, there's two little beams coming out of it. That red beam, that is that's just like normal light that you can see, and the purple one, the narrower one, that is just the infrared signal. That is just a little infrared LED. And oh, cool, I did bring that in there. So again, these are less than a dime a dozen. You know, both the infrared LEDs and the receivers. This is all that powers a full entire game of laser tag. This is what is doing the transmitting and receiving. So if you've ever played laser tag and you have like a headband and you have like the vest and all that stuff, you just have a bunch of the little receivers on you. And then the infrared LED is basically just focused into like, you know, like a less than pretty much like a tight flashlight beam. And so that's what you're shooting when you're shooting out of your laser tag, even though your eyes don't pick it up. And all of the scoring, all of those mechanisms, and you know how it's determined whether or not you're tagged in, tagged out, if you get upgrades, all of that is controlled by a back-end server. So when I shoot, you know, my gun and it gets hit by a tagger, that tagger then communicates with the back-end system saying, hey, this ID actually, you know, tagged me. What does that mean? Does that mean it's going to take away more health? Does that mean this user is out of, you know, out of play? Or if there's a healing frequency, it might mean that, hey, you get to respawn, you get to come back in. So at the end of the day, all that the infrared is doing transmitting, it is just saying, hey, this user tagged this user, and the back end is taken care of by gameplay and everything else along those lines. Now, let's talk about exploiting this weakness. So you guys have probably identified it at this point, but infrared is one way. You know, it's just, you're literally pressing the button and, you know, the volume up or the power off is gonna go off on your TV. It's one way, there's no, you know, response back, there's no authentication, there's none of that nonsense. Every time you shoot the gun, the same code is replayed out of that laser tag gun. It's not sophisticated at all, it's just a normal run-of-the-mill replay attack, you know, that you see in a lot of other wireless technology of just, hey, you know, why design this with a ton of security? At the end of the day, all this is just a game. You know, no one's gonna look at this and attack it or design a device to exploit the weakness of it. So this was my inspiration. This was posted about in 2014 on Instructables way back in the day. You can see this person made a bomb-looking thing out of a 9-volt battery. And basically what this does is similar to what I created in that it has a receiver and then it has a single LED that retransmits that signal over and over and over and over and over. Okay, that's really nice. Looks like a bomb, but I wanted something that had a better UI and I wanted to cause pure chaos, pure havoc, and I just wanted constant firepower always from every direction. So let's take this and take it to the extreme. So I want multiple LEDs. I don't want any of this. You know, I don't want to like, oh look, I'm shooting down range. I want it to be a claymore that goes off every second. You know, I don't want this to be some run of the mill like, oh look, he has 2 guns. No, it's like he has a gun and a nuclear bomb. Thank you. I'm glad you guys appreciate this. I was telling my wife about it, and she's like, wow, that's a lot of work you're putting into this. Yeah, exactly, right? The next thing that I wanted is I wanted this thing to be high power. When I say high power, you notice little blinky LEDs, they come in all ranges of power. I wanted to be as absolutely powerful as possible, so I found one on Adafruit that allows a 1 amp pulse, which is bright when seen from a camera. You could also use it to be an illuminator for if you have a security camera at all. You could absolutely use it for that as well. The next thing is I wanted a UI. The one that I showed you previously that was online, as amazing as that was, it was a single, you know, you shoot into it and then it just replays over and over and over. I wanted a UI so that I could do, you know, data analysis, look at the signals that were coming in, and be able to do it from my phone. Because I didn't want any of this nonsense of trying to like plug in buttons or wires or, you know, look like I have a bomb in a laser tag thing. I just wanted doesn't touch my phone and say, yep, I want constant firepower. And the other thing that I wanted to is I also wanted data logging because once you've cloned a signal, if it's like, say, a respawn signal, that never changes. So why not just keep that with you, just so you can always have it, whenever you go somewhere. Plus, this way too, you can build profiles for all the different laser tag facilities that you visit. Really, this is just absolutely taking it to the extreme. Is it necessary? 100% not. This entire talk is completely unnecessary. I just think it's really fun. Next, I want to say thank you to this rock star. So I'm a pen tester. My background is in civil engineering, which totally correlates. And I reached out in Slack one day and I was like, does anybody know an electrical engineer? Because I'm probably going to start something on fire, because it wouldn't be the first time. And so one of my coworkers reached out and he's like, dude, I'm an electrical engineer. Like, I talk to this guy multiple times a day. And he's like, you didn't know that I was an electrical engineer? So I said, hey, for your help, I'm going to give you a nice shout out in this talk. So this is his rock star in a Corvette LinkedIn profile picture. Sorry, Michael Howard. His name's Michael Howard, too. I didn't put that in there, but he deserves the recognition. Okay, let's talk about some of the design considerations. I wanted to be concealable. I wanted it to be obviously easy to use because maybe I'm not going to go play laser tag, but I want to hand it off to one of my younger cousins and say, hey, you're welcome for complete and utter domination. I wanted to have, again, the ultra bright LEDs, and I also wanted a decent power management. I didn't want, cables running everywhere and, have to put stuff in my pocket. So I needed to figure all that out. And so it's the classic one of these things of like, oh, that shouldn't be that hard to do. And then a week later, you're like, wow, I am getting way too deep into this. So going forward, I decided to base everything off of a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pis run pretty much everything in my house, from sprinklers to my chicken coop to my security system. So I figured, hey, I have a bunch of these lying around. Why wouldn't I? Plus, it's super small. It's really power efficient. It has Wi-Fi already built in on board, and then it can host all the web servery things and all of the file storage and all that. You could have done it with an Arduino, but I find that it's just easier to boot up a Pi and go from there. Next, let's talk about the infrared LEDs. So like I was saying, I picked these up on Adafruit. They have 1 amp pulses. You cannot just use that as an illuminator at 1 amp consistently. When they say pulse, they mean pulse. I found that out the hard way. These also produce a 20-degree cone, so you can think of it kind of like a flashlight. It's a cone that goes out at 20 degrees. So that was really important for the overlapping chaos that was to ensue. So this is kind of the spray pattern. I decided that I wanted at least a 70 degree kill radius. That was pretty sufficient. That if I were standing up here, it would take you all out. You would all be gone. So I decided, I'm going to have a little bit of overlap. So I have 5-degree overlap, and then they're 15 degrees separated since there's a 20-degree cone. So 70 degrees in total. And again, completely and utterly unnecessary. And so if you were to look at this in a 3-dimensional way, it's 70 degrees this way with the 20-degree cone that way. I might even, like future builds, I might even add a second layer that do like a 10-degree or 20-degree tilt up, because one of the laser tag places is actually 2-story, and I would really like to take out both top and bottom without having to go like that. Again, totally unnecessary. I'm going to keep reiterating this, that this is not important and it is not necessary in any way, shape, or form. And so, I started having fun with some hot glue and realized, you know what, I am not going to try and cram this in a tiny little box. Instead, I'm going to 3D print my own. And this is where you start going down the technical rabbit hole. So you can see from this, I am able to space it out at perfectly 15 degrees. And again, totally unnecessary. I just keep reiterating that. And this is how I generated that cone, because in the 3D software, you can like perfectly rotate things. And before, this was like me drilling into it and trying to hot glue it in there. And it was just a pain and a mess. And I was like, man, if I ever talk about this, this is gonna look embarrassing. To be like, and look at my hot glue skills, with some like popsicle sticks, arts and craft. Yeah, exactly. So this is the, again, you're like, oh, oh, I'm just gonna like 3D print a box. How hard could it be? And then again, you spend 3 hours modeling something in Tinkercad, to get all the, because at this point you have all of your design. You want to like mount everything perfectly so nothing rattles around, so there's no jankiness in there. And then you realize like, oh, well, I need a top to this. And that top took way longer to design than it should have because, man, 3D printing. So there's another shot of it. You can see that everything, I have my little calipers to go down to like the millimeter to make sure all the holes in the right place, to get a hole for the receiver, to get a hole for the, you can see in the back, to get power into it. It's just, again, totally unnecessary, but took a lot more work than I thought it was going to. All right, so power management. So I got, again, Adafruit. I should have just asked them to sponsor this, but really, this thing is great. It basically just works exactly how your phone works. When you plug it into the wall, it charges, and when you unplug it from the wall, it doesn't turn off, it just goes off of it. It's basically like a UPS. I ran it off of a 250 milliamp hour battery. It's totally sufficient for 30 minutes of juice. You could probably get more out of it, but also those batteries are super cheap, so you can absolutely, pick up a bunch of them if you want to have extended playtime. Next was powering the LEDs. Again, I was like, oh man, like I don't really know how all of this electronic stuff works. I know how the software part of it works and the theoretical part of it, but the IR LEDs take 1.2 volts, not 3.3, and my electrical engineering buddy was like, oh man, you're gonna blow all of those up, which I did blow up a couple. So what I did is I connected directly, or I got a buck converter to step it down from 3 volts to 1.2 volts to make it more efficient. That way I didn't have to just have a resistor in there and lose power and generate a bunch of heat and all that nonsense. I didn't really understand this part, but he said, trust me, bro, so I did. So the way that you connect to it, the way that you control this is all the commands run in the background. So if your phone disconnects from the hotspot or the access point that is on board the Pi, it doesn't matter. You'll still keep firing to your heart's content. And again, it's all controlled on my phone. That was one of the big use cases that I wanted. And so how does this work? You can either connect the Pi to a hotspot in your pocket. You can connect it directly to your phone if your phone has a hotspot, or you can even stand up an access point using the onboard Wi-Fi on the Raspberry Pi and connect your phone to that. Ton of different options. I ended up just going the hotspot route just because it was easiest. So this is a picture of like the templating of it, just to make sure that I had everything in there A-okay and that it fit. This is the sides built up on it. There's a little bit tangled mess in the front, but that eventually got cleaned up. I just don't have a picture of it. You can see the Raspberry Pi in there. You can see the power boost. You can see the buck converter and all the other mess of wires on the GPIO pins. This is it up and running. So what's really nice is that you just plug it into USB to charge it. So it's just like a phone of like, yep, micro USB. You plug it in and it charges away. And so it manages all the UPS capabilities and all that stuff, and it'll auto shut down if it has low battery or anything like that. Next, the software end. It's PHP. I've never written PHP, but it's like maybe 5 lines for each page. It's nothing crazy. It's horribly insecure. I'm literally just taking input from a field, not sanitizing anything, and running that directly as root on this Raspberry Pi. I'm a pen tester, so I know that is not good. But at the end of the day, if you want to steal like my hex encoded files for my laser tag gun, awesome. You'd also have to break my like crazy WPA2 encrypted passphrase. So I'm not at all worried about it, but I just want to like stave off anybody from saying like, well, actually that's insecure. I know it is. I built it. It uses Pi GPIO-D to basically use the GPIO pins to receive and send all of the information. And then I found this software on some random Raspberry Pi forum, and I can't find it anywhere else. I looked for the GitHub page. It was written back in 2015. It's like 200 lines, but without it, it would have taken me a lot more work to manage this. Basically, you can find the link to it right there. Again, these slides will all be online. You'll see all this nonsense later. But really, this is just somebody's like, oh, I just decided to write this because I wanted to have like a home theater control system. And so the links that he has are all now dead except for this one. This page is where it has it available. And basically the only thing that I changed in this code was to make it shoot faster. That's it. because going back to this, it was just a made for a home theater. So like, why do you need to transmit the same code, 20 times a second? So the interface workflow, or the flow of it is, you just name the signal and you start listening, and so then you shoot your gun into the device, and then it basically writes it out to a file. I could have done a whole database and all that nonsense, but why? It doesn't really matter. Then after that, you select the signal that you want to transmit, you hit fire, and then by default, it will run the command in the background and start pulsing out at 20 times per second. And in most laser tag games, you have anywhere from 3 to 6 shots to kill you. So in half a second, literally you've taken out an entire room of people. So you become the juggernaut at that point. Like, you are unstoppable. I've never played a video inside of a PowerPoint, so I don't know how this is going to work. Oh, snap, it works. So yeah, this is just screen recording on my phone. You would hit the record button. It's going to name it ir.text. Again, doesn't really matter. I shot the code into it, and it says, cool, confirmed, you did it. And then you just select it from your file list. And then you hit fire, and it goes 20 times a second. If you also wanted to cause havoc, the other thing that you could do is you could put in all the TV begone signals and just basically wipe out an entire sports bar. Again, that's like bonus feature you could add on. And I mean, think what you could do with like 70 degrees by 20 degrees at like 20 times a second. You could just turn it on and off, on and off, on and off, and it would work for everything. You could cause havoc. I will let you expand upon that. I'm not going to say that I've already loaded it. I have. But it's one of those things, like multi-purpose. I like multi-tools. I keep one in my pocket. Why not have an IR multi-tool? So that's the user interface. Looks like it's just going to play again. So how did it work out? I ruled the entire thing. Nerds rule the world. So I'm going to now take this basically to talk about how it actually worked in the one time that I used it. So I went with my younger high school cousin to go play laser tag, and we show up, and there's probably a bunch of junior hires. Okay, great. And then this guy walks in. He's like, see me on the board? That's me. And I was like, oh, cool. I've never done this. I don't know how this works at all. False. I knew exactly how it worked. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. I come a couple times a week, with my crew. And it was like, oh, cool. All right. Again, I don't know how this works. Like, is it over there? And he's like, yeah, like, let's go. So then the high schooler that was working the place is like, oh, anybody have a player card? We'll get you your upgrades. And I asked the guy, I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, well, he gets to respawn with all the guns and armor and tools that he had last time he played. And I said, well, we've never played here. He's going to annihilate us. And he's like, sir, it's not like that. I go, it's absolutely like that. You're giving him a better gun, and he's going to annihilate a bunch of junior hires and me, a 30-year-old, and my cousin. And so, again, we start playing, and this guy's like, going crazy, and it's like, what? He's taking out an entire rank of children as they run down this ramp. And that's where I decided to unleash havoc. So I clone my gun, no problem, save it in there, start replaying, and all of a sudden, he just dies instantly. And I was like, huh. And he's like, whoa, like, where did that come from? There was no one around him. Oh, also, while I was doing this, I was flashing dead. So, like, I couldn't even be killed because I was already gone, but my gun was still active, and he didn't realize it. And so I'm basically just following this guy around, and he's dying, but he knows that I can't be killing him because I'm already dead. And it was absolutely awesome. And then the next piece of that is like, okay, that got boring after about 5 minutes. I'm not that big of a troll. And so then what I found is like, hey, I can just go clone the respawn frequency. So then I sent my little cousin, down the main path, and I just kept the respawn frequency right on him. So he never died. He was invincible, which is pretty awesome. And that was essentially the takeaways. I was like, dude, I have no idea this works. And he's like, man, that was a weird game, right? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how this works. I was dead the entire time. And he's like, you didn't respawn? And I was like, oh, is that a thing? He just had no idea. So at the end of the day, This is completely not important. Not important at all. It's just a lot of fun. And it's the taking it to the next level, even though you don't have to. So if you guys have questions about it, you can shoot me an email. The slides will be online. I will at some point put it all on GitHub. I was just like, man, I have a bunch of stuff to do before the con, so I didn't do it. I'll release all the prints and all that nonsense. So if somebody else does want to cause mayhem, you absolutely can. Anyways, thank you guys. Yeah, feel free to shoot me any questions.